Well, this is awesome to see so many people here. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is David Lane. I happen to be the president of the Mountain Meadows Democrats Plus. We always like to include the plus because we want to include more people than just Democrats. And I have the honor to be the president, which I just said, didn't I? All right. Thank you all for being here. We're going to have some video recording. We're going to have some live streaming. We're going to have some recording by KSOR, and all that will be available to be seen by people who don't get a chance to be here tonight. It will be at our Facebook page, Mountain Meadows Democrats Plus. And with that, you don't need to hear anything more from me. We're going to turn it over to Pam and the panel. Thank you.
Hello, am I on? Yes. Okay. I'm definitely on. Maybe we turn this one off. How's that? Okay. Thank you so much for being here. It is so much fun to be here with all of you as we view and listen to the candidates for City Council.
And let us say, through the course of the evening, if you're in the back or any place and you're hearing an echo or you can't hear, hold your arm up and we'll stop the proceedings and make an adjustment, and we'll adjust the time for the candidates so that no one is punished as a result, because we want to make sure that we all go home with a whole lot of information, and I think we will out of these 10 fine candidates. A couple of housekeeping things before we start. First, I want to issue a few thank yous to David Lane and the Mountain Meadows Democrats Plus. This is one of few opportunities we are going to have throughout this campaign season to see 10 candidates on the stage in person and all together. And there was a lot of organizing that went into this. So let's start off by a note of appreciation for them. And to the Rogue Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship for opening up this space. They are continually generous and kind to this community, giving us the opportunity to come together around all kinds of different issues. And I know we're all grateful to them. And for this elaborate, fabulous sound system. And to that, we owe the setup to Walter Ensign. And up in the back, we have John Lim and his assistant, running the soundboards. So let's give them a round of applause too. And then, before we get into the details, I think we should show these candidates our appreciation as well. Running for office is a tedious job. It takes time out of your work and personal life. Serving is even worse, I can guarantee you. And all of these folks have stepped up and given us a chance to really dive deeply into the issues that affect our community and the possible solutions we might look at in the years to come. So let's thank them for doing that. And just to elaborate a little bit, if you have a fabulous experience here tonight and you have neighbors who were not able to come, we are going to have the live stream posted on the Mountain Meadows Democrats Plus Facebook site, so you'll be able to access it there. RVTV, Charles Douglas is here taping for us as a volunteer. Thank you so much for doing that, Charles. It's a great benefit. And he tells me that there will be broadcast on the station. You'll have to check the schedule to find out exactly when that is. But another option for you is to look at the RVTV website. That's rvtv.sou.edu. And by tomorrow, or certainly we'll give them till Sunday, there'll be a spot posted there so that you can go on and you can view the video. So please do share that with anyone you know who was unable to come tonight. Bathrooms are in the hallway. Feel free to get up and move around as you need to in the course of this evening, because we are not going to take any kind of official break. And check your cell phones if you would. We would prefer to move ahead during the evening without any of those annoying alarms going off. Before we get into the debate tonight, I just want to take a minute to clarify our election system here in Ashland, because it's a little bit unusual. The candidates up here are running for 4 different positions within the city of Ashland on that city council, and we'll talk about those specific positions in a moment. But be clear, those are not districts. Although they have chosen a specific position to run for, voters from across the community will make the choices in each one of those positions. So you're going to want to be paying attention tonight to the very interesting debate that we're going to have as a whole, but you're also going to be wanting to look at each of the sets of candidates that you're going to need to choose from for each of 4 seats. So just wanted to clarify exactly how that works. The format tonight is this. In a few minutes, we're going to allow each of the candidates to introduce himself or herself, tell us something, whatever they think is relevant about them and why we should vote for them. They will have 2 minutes to do that. We will then have 3 questions, and they've all been supplied with those questions ahead of time, so they know what they are going to be. And they will also have 2 minutes to respond to each of those 3 questions. At the end, we have a special treat for you, which I won't quite reveal yet, but it's an opportunity for each candidate to make a final impression on you. We have a timer here in the front. She's going to start her timing at 30 seconds, and then go to 15 seconds, and then 0. When you're at 0, I'm going to let you finish your sentence, and then I'm going to cut you off. Okay? So no exploiting the timing situation here. And then let's talk about these position numbers. So we have, and in a minute I will introduce the candidates, but the pink notes that you see up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are for the benefit of John running the sound up there. So that tells him what mic he needs to have turned on. All of us can ignore those pink papers. Don't get distracted by them. So now let's take a minute and introduce the candidates, and they are sitting in order of the position. So running for council position number 2, we have Tonya Graham. Hold up your hand if you would. Mike Morris. We also have a 3rd candidate who has filed for that position but has chosen to not attend tonight, Theo White. Then we have council position number 2. We have Jackie Bachmann. 3, yes, thank you. What I meant to say, council position 3 is actually a 2-year position. So all of these, the other seats are all, the candidates are all running for 4-year terms in position 3 because it's finishing a 4-year term that Greg Limhouse, where Greg Limhouse resigned in the middle of that term. So those folks are running for just 2 years. So we've got Jackie Bachmann, Al Wilstatter, and Julie Akins. And council position number 4, we have Steph Seffinger and Carol Voisin. And council position number 6, we have George Kramer, Steve Jensen, and then we also have a 3rd candidate for that position, Randy Dollinger, who we thought was going to be with us tonight, but has not yet turned up. If he does, we'll let him join. Just a word about the structure tonight. Because we have 10 candidates and we want to get all the information we can from them, there will not be an opportunity for rebuttals. There will not be an opportunity for questions from the audience. But I know, and a word to the wise to the candidates, that your voters will hold you accountable for anything you say tonight. So I am going to assume that you'll be able to back up with data, if necessary, any kind of claims we hear tonight. And with that, I think I've covered all my notes. And so we will begin. And the questions we have tonight, including the introduction, there's an introduction and 3 questions. We're going to shift from one position to the next, to the next, to the next, to allow another group to begin the discussion. But we will start with position number 2. And the first question is simply, stand up and introduce yourselves and tell us, if you would, please, why you are running for office and something about your qualifications. And we'll begin with, actually, Tonya, if you would just stand up. I've had a request for that so that people can see toward the back, but the mics are set to sit down. So just stand up initially so everybody can see Tonya. Okay, that's good. But I think you have to be seated in order to use the mic.
Thank you to the Mountain Meadows Democrats Plus for hosting the forum and for all of you for coming out tonight. I grew up in a small town in Nevada, and when I was 7 years old, my father ran for Justice of the Peace because he saw some issues in town that really needed to be fixed. And I watched him for the next 2 decades serve in that position with thoughtfulness and care, and my takeaway was that when something needs to be fixed in my community, I should step up and do my best to help. We know we're facing many very serious challenges here in Ashland, challenges that threaten our physical well-being as well as the character of our community. And we need to have a very focused and strategic city council in order to address those issues. I've lived and worked and raised a family in Ashland for 22 years. As the executive director of the GEOS Institute, I work with a team of people who helps communities understand and respond to the impacts of climate change. And over the last 10 years or so, in that process, I've learned how to help a community grapple with very complex issues. And I think that's a particularly important skill right now in the country where we are and with the challenges that we're up against. I serve on the City of Ashland's Wildfire Mitigation Commission, and I recently co-chaired the Ashland School District's bond committee process. I have served on the church council for the Ashland UCC Church, as well as served as the board treasurer for the Nonprofit Association of Oregon. I've also seen a lot of you out with the schools issues, so I've helped raise funding for the turf field and also served on a number of senior all-night party committees. Financial management has always been a major part of my job for the last 20 years, including working on the same type of accounting system that the city uses. And I want the future of Ashland to be one where we're resilient, where we're sustainable, and that's why I want to serve on the city council.
For position number 2, Mike Morris. And Mike, if you would, just stand up so that everybody can get a good look at you.
Okay, I'm Mike Morris. First, I want to thank Pam for trying to keep us all in line, probably most like her job in Salem, and the Mountain Meadows Democrats and the Rogue Valley, I have trouble with that name, Unitarian Universalist Church also. I've been on the council 8 years. I'm a 6th-generation Ashlander. I grew up, Al Wilstatter there used to beat me up when I'd misbehave at Twin Plunges. I went through Ashland schools, Southern Oregon State College, which is now Southern Oregon University, and a degree in a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering Technology from Oregon Institute of Technology in Klamath Falls. I was an engineer for 15 years in Boeing, and I came back, worked in the family business, but I'd always liked working with my hands, so I've been a general contractor in the Valley for 25 years. The reason I'm running is I care about this town. It's my hometown, and it's the place I grew up, and it's the place I would like to see the grandkids grow up in also and be able to come back to. I've been back about 25 years. I've been involved with the city 20 years or so, Planning Commission for 13 years, 8 years on the council. I've been on various committees and commissions and liaisons to those committees in the Valley. And what I found is when you get involved in the city, things don't happen quite as fast as you really want them to do. And so I am running for another term to finish up some of the items that I think are really important. And I also feel that I'm in a unique position because in my job, dealing with a lot of the regulations and rules, and I get to see the impacts, whether positive or negative, and the outcomes, and if they're what we intended to have. So, thank you.
So Tonya and Mike are candidates for position number 2. Now we will move to position number 3 and invite Jackie Bachmann to speak with us.
Hi in the back. Well, thank you to all who made this possible tonight. I really appreciate it. When I came to Ashland 4 years ago, I looked around and decided, okay, I want to get involved in my community. So how do I do that? So I decided I would go to every parks meeting and every city council meeting. and boy, did I get involved. I ended up being chair of the Ad Hoc Senior Program Advisory Committee, and then I became a commissioner on the Housing and Human Services Commission. And then, of course, in March, I was appointed as city councilor on the Ashland City Council. And I will tell you that I have found the city council job to be extremely rewarding, and as Pam sort of referred to, it's a lot of hard work, I'll tell you, and you make about $1 a day, so very rewarding though. I think I'm very qualified for this job to continue as a counselor. I'm a proven leader. I have worked with children and families with severe challenges for 36 years in public education. I'm a problem solver who believes in constructive engagement, and that means that I not only identify problems, but I collaborate and communicate to find the solutions to those problems. And I listen to what's going on. And what I'm hearing right now from the community, the most pressing issue I think facing us is explaining how our current budget works. So showing you that it is sustainable. The good news on that, we have an outstanding finance director, an excellent tool, budgeting tool, opengov.com, and very knowledgeable appointed members to our Citizen Budget Committee. Biggest concerns, we need to protect our environment, we need to develop our infrastructure, and we need to educate our community about our priorities and how to meet them. So I hope you'll vote for me, Jackie Bachmann, for position 3 on the City Council. Thank you.
Our second candidate for position 3, Al Wilstatter.
I want to thank you all for coming. This is the biggest crowd I've seen years and years ago. When I was originally on the council 50 years ago, nobody ever showed up. Not only that, let me explain the positioning system. It used to be council members ran at large and the top 3 candidates would take their seats. Actually, the system was introduced several years later, and I was probably the culprit that was responsible. I asked too many questions. I think they want to get rid of me so they could stack enough people against me. Quite frankly, I think we ought to go back to the system as it originally existed, to running at large. And quite frankly, that's the fairest way to go. The positioning system would be great. Would it be wards? Would it be districts? But this is a scam, period. After 50 years, I decided to run for re-election. And actually, quite frankly, I'm a stranger in this community. We're the second city in the state of Oregon, besides Yahas, with a meals tax. We have a municipal airport, municipal golf course, all kinds of. The only thing we don't have is a funeral parlor. It's cradle to grave. And quite frankly, let's get back to common sense and proper spending. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Al. And now our third candidate for position 3, Julie Akins.
It's kind of odd to stand here. It's a little beauty contest even. You can see me in the back. So yes, I am Julie Akins, and I've been a reporter in this community for many years and covered the city beat for the Ashland Daily Tidings. I didn't serve on any commissions because you couldn't do that and be an objective reporter. After covering council for 2 years, I decided that I couldn't actually be an objective reporter on the beat anymore, so I left because what I saw there bothered me. I'm here because I remember the lady in her 70s who testified before the city council that if they raised utility rates, she wouldn't be able to afford the heat and also food, and they still raised utility rates. I'm here because of a young man who spoke before the council about being evicted from his apartment, and he didn't know where he was going to go. And he went over his 3 minutes, and the police chief almost removed him from the council meeting, and that really made me mad. And I'm here because I believe in certain things. I believe in affordable housing. We need to do a better job with it. I notice that we're starting to step up, and I feel really excited about that, but it feels a little late. And I think we need to be more aggressive. I think we can work with public-private partnerships, and we're starting to look at doing that. I think we can look at the way that we hook into SDCs. I think they're expensive, over $20,000 for a sort of a low-cost house. I think we can fix that and make it so developers can build more affordable houses. I stand for living wage jobs. I think we need to encourage employers who bring living wage jobs here so that we can thrive year-round, not just during tourist season. And I believe in more than a sustainable environment, I believe in a thriving one. I think we've made some benchmarks, 8% a year, to try to improve our green energy. I think we can do better than that. As a community, I think we can pull together and do something really exciting and innovating, and I want to be part of it. Thank you.
So those were the three candidates you have to choose from for position 3, Jackie, Al, and Julie. Thank you very much. And now we're going to move to position 4, Steph Seffinger. Hi.
I guess I'll start out with something that my husband said to me today. He talked about the fact that I've come full circle. I was here in the 1980s when my son was born, and I was a school psychologist and a counselor for Ashland High School. I left for a time and was a school psychologist and a program specialist in the Aptos area. I was able to return in 2006, and it's been a wonderful return. I've been able to work on a variety of projects and committees. I worked for the Park Commission, and we got a lot of wonderful things done there. I then worked as a city councilor for the last 4 years, and I found that my interest and my passion for this position has only grown. I feel like I'm really growing into the position in terms of my knowledge of everything that the city does. All of the things that sometimes are hard to learn about because they can be kind of technical. And I feel good about my basic ability to understand what decisions have and what impacts they have on different parts of our community. I love talking to people. I love finding out what the community wants. I think that some of the skills that I also bring are, I have a background in psychology. I like to problem solve. I also know a lot about measurement and motivation and how to efficiently bring about change. I'm concerned about our programs in climate change, including our housing stock, and working and finding meaningful ways to prevent and address homelessness. Thank you.
Our second candidate for position 4, Carol Boyson.
Hello.
Thank you, David Lane, Mountain Meadows Democratic Club Plus, the RV Universalist Unitarians, and Pam Marsh for emceeing. I'm Dr. Carol Boyson. For 16 years, I taught ethical thinking for the 21st century at SOU. I taught my students as I was taught, using the Socratic method, where you ask questions of students until they discover their own answer. I would never presume to tell a young adult what their values ought to be. I helped them discover what those values were for themselves. It was a privilege to engage these young adults. I would bring this same approach to the City Council, asking questions in search of a reasonable and common sense answers to our many problems. At the same time, I will put citizens of Ashland back in the center of decision making. When citizens are informed, when their opinions are sought and valued, the result is collaboration and community. I feel the important ingredient is missing in many recent council decisions. My job as your city councilor is to represent all those who live in Ashland, not just the well-connected. My slogan, Together We Can, emphasizes my collaborative approach Together, we can find common sense answers to out-of-control spending and critical budget issues. Together, we can create an affordable and sustainable city for all residents. The council can't do this alone. The residents of Ashland, acting together with the council, can find solutions to our many pressing issues, especially that of climate emergency. The UN IPCC report published this week clearly states that we're in an environmental crisis. I will bring the political will to work with you and for you so that together we can advance beyond the status quo. I would be proud to serve as your city councilor.
So Stephanie and Carol are our candidates for position 4, and now we will move to position 6 and begin with George Kramer.
I'm George Kramer. I've lived in Ashland with my wife and children since 1982. Professionally, I'm a restoration consultant, a historian of sorts, and I wrote all 4 of the historic districts in Ashland. I was the consultant for the restoration of the Ashland Springs Hotel, Paddington Station, and a bunch of other things. I serve on city and state committees, or have, and national committees, and I'm also the president of the Ashland Emergency Food Bank. I'm pretty much an expert on Ashland's history. It's Ashland's future that I am concerned about. I look at, my wife and I moved here, we bought a little house, we weren't rich, we were industrious, cost $42,000. We raised a family, our kids went to last graduating class at Briscoe, went through the school system, and we built a life, we volunteered in the community and contributed. I don't think people our age can do that in Ashland anymore, when the average house costs $450,000. I'm worried about the city budget. I'm worried about the way that we continue to raise fees on folks, and it hurts them in their pocketbooks, and not everybody can afford it. I'm worried about diversifying our economy. Tourism has been great. The festival, the arts are great things. But I worry that our planning process is so cumbersome and complicated that it's hard for other businesses to thrive here. And so if I am elected, if you are willing to trust me with this, the 3 things I want to work on are budget, housing, and the economy. They're all related. Ashland is a great place. We've made a great life here. I think young people that aren't wealthy, that don't inherit a home, ought to have a chance to make a life here too. And I will work to try to make that possible. Thank you.
And our second candidate for position 6, Steve Jensen.
Thanks to all who made this possible. I have lived in Ashland since 1972. My wife of 40 years, Carol Chrislieb is her maiden name, was born here. After I graduated from Cal Poly, we moved here, and I was general manager of contractor lumberyards in Medford for 15 years. And then I went to teach in high school. I taught science, physical science, and American history, and retired there after 12 years from South Medford High School. I was the second oldest in a family of 8 kids. We were raised in a house until I graduated from high school with 1 bathroom. And my father insisted that we had no TV. I became a voracious reader. I was drafted in 1968 as a conscientious objector and was sent to Vietnam as a medic. I'm a Vietnam vet, obviously. How does all this qualify me to be a city councilor? First of all, I have deep roots in this town. Secondly, as the second oldest in a family, a combat veteran, a salesman, and a teacher, you'd better know how to listen, and you better know how to listen good, and I do. Not having a TV as a kid, I'm a voracious reader. I'm quick and thorough to digest the broad array of information that's presented to us as City Council. As a science teacher, I am a critical thinker, fact and evidence-based and oriented, but as a father, a grandfather, an older brother, I will be able to temper my decisions with heart and wisdom, and I would deeply value your vote. Thank you.
So George Kramer and Steve Jensen are our candidates for position 6 here tonight, and we're going to remove Randy since he didn't show up. So now we're going to move to the questions that have been pre-provided to the candidates to give us some idea of how they see the issues within the city. I'm going to recommend 2 changes as we move into this round. First, you don't need to stand up this time. We all got a good eye on you. But if you would, when you start speaking, just signal for the benefit of our sound system where you are sitting here so that they can make sure that they put the right mic on. And I'm also going to suggest to the audience that we hold the applause during the responses. At the end of the night, we'll give these guys the benefit of our most rousing cheer. But I don't think we need to applaud after every response now that we've done it once for each one of them. So we are going to start with the candidates for position 3 with the next question. And that question is, with all of the demands on Ashland city government, how would you determine priorities and what would those priorities be? And Jackie, you can start us off.
Thank you. Well, when you're trying to figure out priorities, there are 2 main things you need to be sure you have. First of all, you need the right people, and then you need the right process. You're going to get the chance to vote on the right people November 6th. It's also my birthday, just for your information. How about that? Thank you. I'll tell you, for the right people, I see those people on the city council. I see collaboration, I see constructive engagement going on, and I see real listening to make decisions. I also see highly knowledgeable city staff. I'm talking about the department heads of finance, public works, police, fire, and our outstanding new city administrator. You won't find another staff as fine as this one in other communities our size. Once you have the right people in place, you need the right process, and that's ongoing strategic planning. We need to listen to you as the citizens at all of our meetings. And then we need to also listen and understand what the city staff are saying in terms of analyzing our needs and meeting our needs in the community. And then, as counselors, we need to weigh what we're hearing from the community and what the city staff is saying to us and make sound decisions based on facts and deliberation. The priorities we need to look at are basic immediate needs first. That means public safety, fire and police. That means public works, water, streets, power, and sewers. Then we get to improving our livability, jobs for working families, programs for seniors and kids, affordable housing, more transportation options. And overall this, we need to look at protecting our environment and living within our means.
Thank you. And Al, would you take it on?
Actually, I think one of the biggest problems we have, those demands were generated by the free federal dollar. We created those demands which were unsustainable. Therefore, we have an unsustainable budget in Ashland today. After I left the council, I was involved with Oak Valley Transit, and everybody thought we were crazy and had quite a bit of opposition from some of the council members in Ashland for forming a different form of government. Quite frankly, we worked hard, and I'm proud of having been the first director of the Oak Valley Transit District. Thank you.
Julie Akins.
Right here. My priorities would be your priorities, and people have been really clear about what they are. I attended all the council meetings, and I've read the letters to the editor, and I think we can all agree what they are. They're rather simple. Affordable housing. People need a place to live. They need to be able to buy houses. We need young people back in the community. It's not a good thing when schools close. That means that we don't have children here. How do you have a future without kids? We got to have affordable housing. Living wage jobs. We need to encourage people to come here for living wage jobs that go year round. When we're just only reliant on a tourist industry, it's not going to sustain us long term. And the environment, which we all know the feeling of forest fires every summer, right? We all know about the smoke. We know that climate change is real. I don't think anyone here would debate that in this room. We felt it. And so we have to look for ways to encourage our tourist industry and help our businesses survive this, and also start looking at ways to have a third rail of the economy. Those are the things that you've talked about, and I see those as important priorities. So how do we get there? Right? Because any of us can say we should be doing these things, and it's super easy to throw rocks at the incumbents and say they're not doing enough. But I think I can do better than that. I think that we can create affordable housing through a variety of ways. Some of those ways are working with developers to have affordable housing by lowering the cost to build housing. The regulations are rather torturous, and it takes a really long time. And $20,000 to get on the grid is too much per house. I think that we can work with people who own land and houses here and talk to them about not leaving them vacant for much of the year. I mean, these houses are sitting empty. The city of Vancouver has a plan where if you leave an empty house and you don't use it to occupy it, then you have to pay a fee, a percentage. I think those are some innovations we can make. And there are many more, but I don't have enough time. But I see those priorities clearly, and they come from you, and I appreciate hearing them. Thank you.
And now we'll move to position number 4, and Stephanie.
Yes, we have a lot of demands and priorities. Just as you have basic needs, the city has basic needs. Police, fire, safety, infrastructure. We have to maintain our city in a way that the quality of life improves for everyone in the city. We have debt, AFR debt, wastewater treatment debt, staff expenses, and PERS costs. So it's after we deal with these issues that we look at what money we have left for our other priorities that are important to the community. And we've already heard what some of those are, and I agree with those. We have to have a new strategic plan and update what we have done. The reason for this, to me, is that in recent years, the government has changed a great deal. I'm sure that you all know that. Federal spending is not covering costs it used to cover for medical care, for the environment, for social services. And so what's happened is that the city has been asked to deal with a lot of those issues. We have the AFR program, which is part of your utility bill in protecting our forests. We have programs to address affordable housing trust fund, social service grants, and we're trying to help all of our community be strong. I'm here to represent all of you, not a special group, but I want to do my best for everyone, and I want our kids to be able to live here and have a sustainable future. Thank you.
Carol Voisin.
Not everything can be a top priority. As City Council, my approach begins with you, the citizens of Ashland. I know what I think the priorities should be, but you pay the bills with your hard-earned your hard-earned money, and so you must have a voice. What the services are must-haves. What are the services that we must have, and what can we do without? Those are the questions. To answer those questions, this last May and June, I organized 5 focus groups, gatherings of 10 to 12 people with a professional moderator. What I learned was invaluable. As a counselor, I will continue this approach, asking citizens what services are must-haves and what can we do without. In May and June, I heard you identify a number of key priorities. The critical need for affordable housing, the need to curb our skyrocketing utility bills, the need for a balanced city budget, the need to rationally address the changes climate in our energy and community development, and the need to build a broader sustainable economic base beyond tourism. Let's take a critical look at Ashland's electric power. It is possible for Ashland to become 100% renewable city within 10 years. Why can't we do this? Why can't we as a city commit to this? Many other communities across the United States have done so. And for heaven's sakes, let's think about letting go of the $10 to $12 million new city hall in favor of a $2.5 million retrofit. Let's reconsider the 7.5 MGD water treatment plant in favor of a 2.5 to 50 MGD plant. The cost half as much. Right there, I just saved the city upward of $12 million.
And the candidates for position 6, beginning with George Kramer.
If you go back and you look at the history of the council, there are goals, council goals that have been council goals for decades. And I think that we have to recognize that as wonderful and dynamic of a place as Ashland is, we are also a town of 21,000 people with some limitations. And there are lots of really cool things that we could do, but we can't afford to do them. There are basic services cities need to provide. You've heard about them: police, fire, water, and sewer. And then there are 3 priorities that I think overlay all of that, which are the budget, getting our budget under control to make it sustainable, providing housing so that people that work here can afford to live here, and building our economy, diversifying our economy so that they can make a living wage job and afford Ashland housing prices. I think that we have a council of really good people that have worked really hard, but are somehow incapable of saying, that's a great idea, but we can't do that. And we have a public that has a big heart and wants to do a lot, but we need to prioritize, and we need to figure out what we realistically can do and what we can pay for. I want to be a counselor that works just as hard finding ways to cut our budget and save money as one who looks at finding new methods of revenue. I think that that's possible. Our budget has grown significantly in the last decade alone. There are places to cut. The $10 million city hall, I was on that ad hoc committee, is just one of them. And that's something we've invested $200,000 trying to figure out that we could have put into something else or kept in your pocket. Thank you.
Steve Jensen.
So sometimes the question is, how do we prioritize our priorities? Most of the candidates have already talked about the things that we're required to do in a fiduciary responsibility as counselors. I want to talk a little bit about how to fine-tune that. One of the things is what is financially possible. The art of the possible is what's financially possible. A fundamental rule would be to identify a funding source before the fact and not after the fact. The wish list, as a big brother, you sometimes have to say, you can have this and this, but you can't have that. And we're going to identify at Christmas time how we're going to pay for that. Secondly, and I think this is important, is what is philosophically tenable. And by that I mean, what is the role of government in the hills of Southern Oregon and little old Ashland? It would be great to fix the healthcare system. It would be great to tackle income inequality, but in a small town, in the governance of a small town, we have to stay in our own lane philosophically and financially. The strategic plan that Steph mentioned is really important. We've gone a little bit astray from the strategic plan because we've had some administrative turnover that I think we're all aware of. But I am absolutely delighted and encouraged by our new city administrator and her vision of revitalizing the strategic plan process. Under her leadership, We will revitalize this process, and she has emphatically stated that as one of her immediate goals, and I know that the council looks forward to her guidance on that. Thank you.
And now we're going to move to the top of the table to hear from the candidates for District 2. Tonya.
Thank you. First, we need to remember what many folks have already mentioned, which is that the primary goal and purpose of city government is to provide the services that we need: police, fire, water, wastewater, roads, planning, and in our case, electricity. And because that's such a big part of the work that the city does, we need to make sure that it's being done in a cost-effective way, that it's equitable, and that it makes sense for the people of Ashland. And that's a big part of that, is making sure that our budgeting process is sound and that it takes the time it needs to make sure we're spending our money correctly. At the same time, our larger community is grappling with many different issues that we've heard about tonight: affordability, homelessness, climate change, wildfire risk, economic disruption in developing more diversified income streams for people who live here. All of those things are very important issues, but we need to decide which of those are more important than others in the short term. Because what we are doing right now is chasing along behind all these very serious issues and not investing enough to get out in front of any of them. And the way that we do that is we work with the community. The council and the city government needs to lead a strategic planning process with this community, where we go out and ask you, which of these things do we need to focus on in the near term? And once we have that information, to the extent possible, we need to align city resources. So city staff, council time, funding where it's possible, to move those issues forward. And the strategic plan has been mentioned here. We do have a strategic plan. It was passed in 2015. We're supposed to have updates every 6 months, but we've only gotten one. We are 5 updates behind. And what that tells me is that this council doesn't have a culture of spotting a problem, developing a solution, implementing it, and tracking that solution. But that's exactly what we need if we are going to make real progress against any of the issues that we've been talking about tonight.
And Mike.
I guess I don't need to list all the services. They've been done several times. It'll save me some time. I'll just list some of the others that we do provide besides Ashland Fire Network, the ambulance service. We do conservation services, forest water, watershed management. We do grants, social services grants. We do economic development, affordable housing. Like I say, we have a golf course and an airport. We have a number of things. My overriding concern when it comes to setting priorities is basically quality of life. When I work on jobs throughout the city, I get to ask people, they come by, what are you doing in my neighborhood? What are we doing here? Why do you come to Ashland? And most of them will say they feel safe, there's quality of life, and they like the community, they like the services, they like the downtown. We managed to save the hospital, one of the many things we've done the last few years. A new water system for the future. Basically, the climate is going to change. Our resources are going to be a little limited. We're changing that. I also agree that we need to update our Ashland 2020 plan, which is visiting plan, and our strategic planning and our goals. And we prioritize those. Anything that comes to us at the council level basically is addressing the priority and the goal in our packet. There's something in there that says, we are doing this is which goal it is addressing. And so I think we need to start the plan and update it. We need to update the vision plan. We also need to look at incorporating the climate energy action plan with our goals. And I think now that we do have a complete staff, we have Public Works, the city administrator, and we have a finance director, which we haven't had, we've had temporaries for quite some time. I think it's time to do that, and I think we can. Thanks.
So we have now heard from all of the candidates on the issues and priorities facing the city, and I'm sure you will agree with me that it is a daunting list. So we are going to turn to an easier subject, which is the budget and how we fund all of these things. So the question we've given to the candidates is, Ashland's annual expenses have increased approximately 45% in the past 10 years, and that's using the period from 2007 and 8 to 2017-18. Is this growth sustainable, And if not, what needs to change? And we are going to start with the candidates for position 4. So Steph Seffinger, if you would start us off, please.
Thank you. Well, there's some good news. The budget projection for 2018-2019 is less than 2017-2018. So we're going in the right direction, I hope. Other good news is that the city is actively working on how to make our budget process more transparent and understandable. There have been a number of misconceptions about our budget, and we are developing new tools to make it more understandable to you, so you can see where it's going, what the budget actually is, what the revenues are. And I think that this will help us process in our next budget cycle. That the public would like to see some changes to our next budget cycle. And I think that that's a goal of mine too, to make it a more, a process where there is agreement and listening to each other. We're all citizens, the council and the members of the budget committee. And we need to work together to develop a budget that's balanced and supports the city and at the same time doesn't raise revenue that provides obstruction to our ability to live successfully in this city. We have hired a gifted city administrator who will provide needed oversight to the efficiency of city operations. We've hired a new financial director who is establishing a positive and open budget process. We're looking at things like staff vacancies that can be reclassified or reduced, and developing better master plans to improve forecasting future public and safety needs. Thank you.
Carol Voisin.
Obviously, this is not sustainable. PERS and the rising healthcare premiums for 275 city staff are the single greatest cause of budget increases. But also the council has failed to apply the brake on the departmental spending. I was shocked when the council approved 5 new police officers with absolutely no revenue stream to pay for them and without any increase in population or crime to warrant it. To me, this was irresponsible. Even though 4, not 5 officers were hired, the expense for officers, $600,000 to $800,000, falls into the general fund, a volatile and a vulnerable fund already. This kind of reckless spending must be brought to an end. We have a responsibility to pay our PERS and support our staff with the best health care we can afford. However, we need to consider changes in both of these. This begins with a serious discussion with the Citizens Budget Committee during the next budget planning process. Nothing should be off the table. Everything must be scrutinized. I believe strongly that the Citizens Budget Committee is a necessary and critical part of the budget process. Our community is lucky to have in our midst citizens who bring a critical eye and lifetime expertise to the budget process. I respect these citizens on the committee. Their voices must be heard, they must be heeded. I will engage the citizens on the committee with respect and as an equal. Finally, I believe we should return to an annual budget cycle for the greater responsiveness and flexibility of the city. The current every other year process is unwieldy and unresponsive to changing conditions.
So again, just to recap, those are your candidates for position 4, and now we'll move to position 6 and ask George Kramer to speak with us.
I think we need to recognize that a lot of Ashland's budget is out of its control. It's stuff that happens because of the way property tax is assessed in the state of Oregon that we can't control. And it's the rise in the costs of health care and gasoline and all the other things that the city needs to buy. PERS is baked in, as some people will tell you, and we can't change that. But we need to look carefully at our staffing, which continues to grow, although our population doesn't. And if we can't adjust and renegotiate union contracts with city staff, then we at least need to stop hiring more people. Or we need to reduce other positions to fill them if our priorities change. The departmental budgets are out of whack. I always laugh that maybe we could drive the little white trucks for 5 years instead of 4 years. Maybe we could get away with 3 dump trucks instead of 4. Maybe we don't need to have every toy known to mankind in a city of 21,000. We could rent stuff. There are things that we can do. We cannot waste money on studies for City Hall. We can fix what we've got, we can maintain what we've got, and we can live within our means. And as other people have said, we certainly shouldn't be taking on new positions without identifying a funding stream. And we have to stop using 4 votes to raise utility taxes and utility fees like it's an ATM. That falls on the weakest amongst us. Yeah, most of us can afford $1.50 more a month, but when it's $5 more a month, it starts to hurt people, and we need to think about that before we hire new staff.
And Steve Jensen?
So many here have heard this before, but I'm going to repeat it because I think it applies here. Mark Twain famously said one time that there are lies, damned lies, and statistics. I'm going to rephrase that. There's lies, damned lies, and budget manipulations. So the 45% increase from 2007 to 2017 or 2018 is a correct number. I checked with Mark Welch on this, our wonderful new finance director. The one thing he pointed out was that 10-year period was a unique time frame, and it's uncharacteristic reflective of what the reality of the budget is. In 2007, 2008, which many of you remember, was the bottom point of the Great Recession. City spending went way down, they laid people off, system development charges weren't coming in, and so on. So you compare that low point to the 2017-2018 budget, which is a relatively high point because things are going good in Ashland. System development charges are up, permits are up, and so on. It's an unfair comparison. The more realistic comparison is the last 5 years. It has only gone up 12%. And if you account for inflation and this is being on the low side, 2% a year, we're really only seeing about a 2.4% increase per year. So you can select any number of budget statistics that you want and come up with the lies, damned lies, and budget manipulation. So, real quickly here, the sky is not falling. The city is not going into receivership. We're not going bankrupt. We are keenly aware of it. And as Barack Obama said famously one time, trust us. We're very much aware. We have new processes. We got this.
Those are your candidates for position 6, and now we're going to move up to position number 2, Tonya and Mike.
So I'm going to give you the perfect political candidate answer, and that is, it depends. So local governments use what we call a fund accounting system. It's not as though local government has one giant pot of money that they can use wherever they want to. Money comes into this system and it's restricted to specific uses. And so the budget is really adding up all of those different funds and seeing how that works as a whole. Some of those pots go up and down, so major infrastructure projects will cause the budget to go up. Over time, it should drop back down. The same for grants. So right now, the fire department is trying to get $3 million in a grant to help us firewise our homes. If that comes in, that will raise the budget, but it's not necessarily a problem. Managing taxpayer money is arguably one of the most important things that a city councilor can do, and so it's critically important that we do this right. We need to make sure that the budget is conservative in terms of both revenue and expenses, and that means checking our assumptions and making sure that we're digging into those numbers. Now, in 2017, the budget process was handled over the space of 4 meetings in 3.5 weeks, and they handed off between the 2 finance directors in the middle of it. This is not what you do when you have a 2-year budget that is over $250 million. This is not good process. And because it was rushed, the council approved a budget with a $45 million error in it. And I believe that that error certainly would have been caught if there had been more time. The councilors could have extended it. There were still 3.5 more weeks before the budget was due, and they didn't. Fortunately, because of the nature of the mistake, it's not a material issue. But it begs the question of what else was missed. And so before approving a budget, if I am elected as your counselor, I will make sure that I understand why the budget is the size it is, if it's larger, why that is, and whether or not anything in there is a problem, because you can have a problem even if your budget's the same size as it was 2 years before. Thank you.
And Mike Morris?
Okay. I looked at that number, 48%. I came up with 49. However, if you go back 2 years, if you go back to 06, 07 and take it to the present time, that increase is 38%. The other thing you can see is if you go back those 2 years, we have fewer employees at the city of Ashland than we did back then. And so I don't believe all the gloom and doom that is being spread here. The other thing that's interesting is you do have cost of living, you have pass-through funds, you have funds that come and go, and we account for them. But I want to take a comment in that I spent a few days working on a job at Brookings, actually a few weeks, and I was sitting in a bar and I was listening, watching a Ducks game and having a beer and a burger and some fries and talking to the guy next to me. And I said, "Where are you from?" He goes, "Well, I'm from Brookings." And he says, "Where are you from?" I go, "Well, I'm from Ashland." He goes, "You know, it must be really nice to live in a town that believes in itself enough to invest in itself." And that is one of the great things that I like about Ashland, and it's always been that way. We invest in ourselves. We think we're worth doing that. And yes, we make some errors along the way, and I've seen several, and I think we can avoid them. The last budget cycle, like you said, we had a no finance director. We had acting city administrators that hadn't been through a budget like that. And Public Works, we had an acting, you know. So I think we can do a little better, but I still believe that what we're doing is not as bad as everyone will state. And I still believe we need to invest in this community to keep it strong, to keep it going, and to make it a place that we still want to reside in. Thank you.
And now the candidates for position 3, and Jackie Bachmann will start us off.
Thank you. It's certainly true that annual expenses have increased, and we need to understand why. Salaries have gone up, cost of living, 2% a year for the last several years. Benefits have increased 48%. PERS, as you're hearing tonight, it's baked in. There's not a lot a council can do with PERS. When you look at healthcare costs and comparable to similar communities, you're going to find that we're not out of line with what we're doing with healthcare, and we have decreased the expenses in our healthcare recently. We've also changed how parks is funded. 10 years ago, property taxes went directly to parks. Now, the money comes through the city budget and then is sent over to parks as an expenditure. That's a big swing in how it appears in the spending in the budget. We also included all the total cost of our capital projects in the last cycle. And so you take the water treatment plant, we've only begun the design of that, and yet that total amount is in the budget right now. That said, we need to be fiscally responsible for every decision we make. We need to ask the question, do we do something now, or do we put it off into the future? But we have to look at the health and the safety of this community when we make those decisions. The same thing with people. Do we replace a position or do we wait? And that's something we've been doing. One of the reasons we have master plans for our major projects is to make sure we can look at phasing in these big spending projects that we do, like a water treatment plant. We've got to educate our community on how the budget works. We have to correct misunderstandings about our budget reserves. And we need to be diligent in making each decision within our means, which leads to fiscal sustainability. Thank you.
Al Wilstatter?
Thank you. I respectfully disagree with you, Mr. Hoffman. Number one, I very recently, have you read the charter, by the way? There's a stipulation that the Parks Department every month furnish the recorder with their expenditures. I asked for that report, there hasn't been one. And I waited and waited, I called back. And the answer was, they've changed it. If that was changed, it needs a charter change, and you, the citizens, ought to demand that. Thank you.
And Julie Akins?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know about gloom and doom, but I was there for the Citizens Budget Committee hearings. I went to all of them. I was covering it for the paper. And let me tell you, it was not a collaborative process. It darn near came to fisticuffs. At one point, the mayor said he was going to walk out of the process. I do know that at the end of it, a budget was passed, and then revisions were made, I think maybe the week later, 2 weeks later. The Budget Committee agreed that the city could not afford new police officers. 4 new police officers. The City Council went ahead and passed it anyway, and then increased utility fees to deal with that. So I feel like that's an example of how money gets spent and how citizens try to weigh in and aren't heard. And citizens need to be heard. I do think that, I do understand that there are different pots of money for different things, but it's still money. I think the $100,000 art piece that many people didn't really like, that came from an outside artist, that's a problem. I mean, I bet you I could throw a rock and hit 3 artists right now. You know, our town is full of really talented artists whose artwork is on display in public art in other cities. We have in fact, an artist who has work in Seattle being displayed. I don't know if it's a trade agreement, but it was really odd. So, you know, we have ways of spending money that I don't think are responsible. Why pay $10 million for a new city hall when you can retrofit it for $2.5 million? Why do that? Why move City Hall when it's in a lovely location right downtown, accessible to the citizens? I think that's nice. I like Briscoe School, it's beautiful, but we bought it without any idea of what we're going to do with it. Why would we do that? We have to have a plan first of spending. We have to be responsible. Of course we understand we need to pave the roads, although I sure am waiting for Hersey Street, still not done. It's been over a year. So we have to pave the streets, I get that, but we can do better than that. Thank you.
For our third and final question, we are going to ask the candidates to dive into an issue that you heard referenced several times when they talked about priorities, and that is climate. And specifically, the question that we have asked them to answer is, what can the city do to meaningfully reduce our greenhouse gas footprint? And we're going to start with the candidates for position 6 and ask George Kramer to start us off.
Okay. The city has adopted a couple of policies, the SEAT policy and the 10 by 20 policy, that address climate change and reducing our carbon footprint. And I support those, especially the SEAT program, because of its gestation with Ashland's children. On the 10 by 20 plan, I tend to be suspicious and doubtful about large-scale multi-million-dollar solar arrays on the Imperatus property. I tend to remember the old E.F. Schumacher book, Small is Beautiful, and think about what we can do that isn't a $10 million project. And I would look at distributed solar. Maybe we sell the Imperatus property and use those funds to put smaller solar arrays on existing city properties. But more importantly, again, we're a town of 21,000. And while reducing our carbon footprint is important, probably the most meaningful way we can do that is to reduce the use of private vehicles, gas-consuming vehicles. And to me, that's a planning issue. We should be looking at land use planning changes that allow people the option of walking to buy a carton of milk or a cup of coffee or to get a haircut. And by changing the way we develop a city, we're here with the Mountain Meadows Democrats. It's always amazed me that when Mountain Meadows was built, you had to drive 3 miles into Safeway to buy a carton of milk. It seemed like it would be a lot more logical to have small little neighborhood centers, commercial centers, that would encourage people to walk, encourage people to get out of their car. And the side benefit of that, aside from the health of walking or biking, is that maybe they would meet their neighbors and maybe they would talk over the fence. That's how I think we can meaningfully and realistically address climate change and greenhouse gases in Ashland. Thank you.
Steve Jensen?
So I served on the, as chair, on the Ashland Forest Lands Commission and 3 or 4 years as chair, and was one of the primary editors of the nationally recognized Ashland Fire Plan. It's a deeply technical document that we developed in-house and saved the city a bunch of outside contract money. There's a chapter in there called Climate Change, Global Yet Local. So here's a little dilemma in the watershed. The primary goal, one of the primary goals is to protect our water source and to prevent a catastrophic forest fire. In order to do that, we have to bring the forest back to health and overgrown forest by fuels reduction. The way we do fuels reduction is by thinning, piling, and burning. All right? So the burning gives us two things. It gives us smoke, but measured amounts of smoke, which is generally tolerable, and we might as well start getting used to it. But it also does what? It releases CO2 into the air. So that's our dilemma. The other dilemma is, as we reduce those fuels, the carbon sequestration that was tied up in that overgrown forest is also released. So the dilemma here is that the correct thing to do to prevent the catastrophic wildfires, not in our watershed, but like the ones that we saw this summer? It's a little bit of an existential dilemma. I would agree with George about the large mega projects on the solar arrays. While it's a feel-good project and sounds tenable, financially it's a real stretch. And I would really challenge the candidate who said that we could be 100% with renewable energy in a very short period of time. That is a bridge way too far. I think we have to be realistic in this town about our response to carbon emissions. Thank you.
And we'll move to the candidates for position 2. Tonya Graham.
Addressing the climate crisis has to be at the very top of Ashland's list of priorities because it needs to be at the top of every community's list of priorities. The International Panel on Climate Change just this week released a special report downgrading the level of global warming down from 2 degrees Celsius to 1.5 degrees Celsius before we hit catastrophic impacts. Once we tip this system, we can't get it back. And so what this means is that communities across the country, especially since the Trump administration has abdicated its responsibility, the leadership has to start at the city. And what that means is we have to do a couple of things. We need to conserve energy wherever we can. We need to transition away from burning fossil fuels and towards electricity. And then we need to meet that electrical demand by developing local renewable resources, of energy resources. And when we do that, the beauty of that is that those processes and those projects, they create family wage jobs, and that money stays in the community. We need to do this urgently. What we've done as a community so far in response to a lot of citizen activity and activism is create a solid set of targets, but we're not moving fast enough to meet them. And so what we need to do is, we right now have an ad hoc committee process that's working on implementing the Climate and Energy Action Plan. What we need is a task force. And that task force needs to include not only city government, but also the business community. It needs to include local civic organizations. It needs to include the university and the school district. We all need to come together to figure out what are our individual pieces of this climate change puzzle, and then set about the task of getting those pieces done.
Mike Morris.
Okay. So, when the Climate Energy Action Plan came to the council, it was kind of interesting because I somewhat joked that we could do this 8% really easy. Just no one use natural gas and no one drive their kids to school. And it didn't go over very well. People still want to use those things. Natural gas gets cheaper and cheaper, and driving is pretty simple. And so personally, I think we need some type of a mindset of how we look at this. The SEAP plan incorporates a lot of changes, what the city can do, what we do for purchase goods. And in reality, there's not a lot of impact that the city as an entity, the city of Ashland, can change. So it's up to us, it's up to everyone in this room. It's not up to someone else to do it for us. I think it's really an issue that we need to look at and work with that SEAP committee and figure out what steps we would be willing to take. If we're not willing to take any, I think we're done. And we wouldn't need to reinvest in the community. But I think we honestly, it's up to each one of us as an individual to see what we can do and how we can help the process to make it easier for the community to meet the 8% reductions every year and maybe possibly even 10 or 12%. So.
And the candidates for position 3?
Okay. So what the city needs to do is absolutely lead the way with a clear plan. And the good news is we have a clear plan in our Climate Energy Action Plan. That's our SEAP plan. We also have a Conservation Commission with active citizens who are working throughout our community on all different ways to conserve. What is the city doing? What are we working on? Well, we're expanding and improving our pedestrian, bike, and public transportation. We're trying to make recycling as easy as possible. We're giving incentives for efficient buildings and climate-friendly land use. We're also increasing the use of solar throughout our community. We're supporting more efficient vehicles. We're giving grant money for innovative energy ideas. We're developing wildfire prevention and forest resiliency plans. So what's the city's job in all of this? Well, it's what you're hearing here. It's engaging, educating, and motivating every one of you, all of us together. It's going to take everyone to make this work. What can you do? You can do one car instead of two. You can use the bus. You can come up with your own recycling system in your kitchen. You can walk instead of drive, and you can ride share. You need to educate yourself and your families. I hope every one of you reads the SEAP plan. It's on the city website. It's an excellent roadmap for all of us. You can go to a Conservation Commission meeting or look at it at home. We need to get motivated. Knowledge is power. We've got to work together. Look around our beautiful surroundings here in Ashland. If we work together, we can take care of this beautiful community and keep it that way. So let's do it. Thank you.
Al Willstatter?
There's some very simple solutions. The Ashland School District is the only one that has their own school bus system in the whole valley. RVTD runs parallel routes. There's no reason in the world why some of these kids couldn't be bought bus passes and eliminate some of those routes. They're parallel routes. They're totally unnecessary. Thank you.
Julie Akins?
That was a really interesting point, Al. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm suspecting you didn't come here to hear from us what you should be doing to conserve more. I agree, we can all do our part. I think we're all working on having a smaller footprint, but what you're here to hear is what city councilors would do. And so I think there are some things that we can do. I agree with Tonya. This is a pressing issue. How are we going to do anything else if we're burning, if our earth is on fire, which it literally is? So what are we going to do about it? I think of this guy, Brett. He's a mad scientist here in town and runs a solar business, and he's always making scooters in vehicles completely solar powered. And you know what? He's selling them to people in India, but nobody's buying them in Ashland, and he's like right down the street. So there are things we can do to be innovative. I tend to think we do need a greater array of solar panels in our city, and I think that the city can lead the way on that. I do think that's a clean way to have energy. The Imperatus property, I understand the concerns about that. I know that there's migratory birds and other issues there, but I think there may be some mix. There may be some way to collaborate on that and make it work better. And here's another thing. I was gone last year, the entire month of December, on a research assignment. When I came back, my utility bill was exactly the same as if I had been home the whole month. If we want people to conserve, give us some incentive. When it's $84 before I even turn on the lights, that doesn't work. That doesn't encourage me to conserve. So give me a reason to conserve, and then we will. But clearly, it's a number one issue. The children in this community have come to us and asked us to solve it, and I think we need to do that. Thank you.
And finally, we'll hear from the candidates for position 4, and Steph Sevinger. Mike?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
It isn't a question of what we should do. It's a question of what we're doing and what we need to continue to do. We developed a community plan, the SEEP Energy Action Plan. In 2015, we had a committee, and in 2017, the city adopted that plan. We now have an implementation committee that's working on developing the benchmarks and ways to measure if we're meeting those standards. This is only one part of what we need to do. The city is working very hard at looking at making it a priority to look at what the city can do to reduce its carbon footprint with each department in terms of buying what they're buying in terms of vehicles, and looking at having that be an important goal for every commission. We also are developing a plan called Empower Ashland, where we're working with our citizens and our businesses so that they can understand how to have impact in reducing their carbon footprints. We have, for example, a tool that you can use to see what your carbon footprint is and how you can reduce it. There are big ways that you can reduce your carbon footprint, like buying an electric car or looking at putting on solar panels. There are also smaller things you can do, like conserving, reducing, reusing, and I think it's very important to realize that this issue is vital to our next generation, and one that we have to address in the most serious way we can.
Carol Voisin.
I don't know how to say this, but we are in a dire emergency. The UN ICPP notified us of that. They put us on alert. We have just 10 years to take action to keep the temperature from rising above 1.5 Celsius. Ashland cannot opt out. Not one citizen can turn their head the other way. We must act to keep the emissions below 800 plus billion tons. Once we reach that number, there's no return. We can add our 100,000 tons here and there, but I'm telling you, we have to think bigger. In Ashland, we currently purchase our power from Bonneville, which is 80% hydroelectric. But we receive our power from the grid. The grid buys at least 50% of the power from coal and oil producing power companies. So at best, we are only 50% renewable. For the past 5 years, the Renewable Energy Initiative, known as the 10 by 20, which is now an ordinance, has been put on the back burner by the City Council. This status quo is not acceptable. The new council must take action in facing climate change by declaring that we have a climate emergency. Then we must implement a 10 by 20 ordinance without delay. That can be any form of solar or wind, but we must act on it. Next, we must fast-track SEEP, our Climate Energy Action Plan. Finally, Ashland need not go it alone on doing our part in facing the climate emergency. The council must reach out to Jackson County municipalities to work on renewable grid for our region. If we have concerted leadership and citizens working together and local expertise and talent, we can do this, and we must.
Thank you. So that concludes the answers to the questions that we prepared ahead of time. When we allocated the 90 minutes for tonight, we decided to give each candidate just a little bit more time so that we'd all go away having heard these very substantive answers to the questions that we posed. But we also wanted each one of them to have one final opportunity to make an impression. So we asked them to choose for this last exercise 5 words, just 5 words, to leave you with a lasting memory or a reason to vote for them or a special takeaway. So I'm going to call out their names. I'm going to ask them to wave and give us our 5 words, not more than 5. 4 is okay too. So these are the words to remember your candidates. Tonya Graham.
Proactive, strategic, steady, engaged, listener.
Mike Morris.
Responsible, inquisitive, thoughtful, pragmatic, and collaborative.
Jackie Bachmann.
Positive, engaging, collaborative, constructive, leader.
Al Wilstatter.
Direct and honest.
Say it again.
Right. What did he say? Direct and honest.
Everybody hear that?
He said direct and honest.
Okay, Julie, you get your 5 words.
Chutzpah, 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 chutzpah.
And Steph Seffinger.
Positive, pragmatic, dedicated, caring, and creative.
Carol Boyson.
Critical thinker, active listener, hard worker, optimistic, and dedicated. They're hyphenated. They're hyphenated.
George Kramer.
Thanks outside the box.
Oh, ooh, nice. He has extra credit for 4. And Steve Jensen.
Refreshing, receptive, realistic, reliable, ready.
So I think you will agree with me that we have an extraordinary lineup of candidates willing to take on a very hard job on our behalf. And now it's time for us to show our appreciation to all of them for being here. And just a couple more notes before we disperse. I want to thank Louise Shockett, who is going to need a neck massage after sitting here timing and looking down at her timer. Charles for videoing us tonight, Sarah and Colette for running the live Facebook, and John and team for doing the sound up there, which has made it all possible. Thank you all so much for coming. And let me say, if you haven't registered, October 16th is your deadline to register to vote. If you need to update your registration, you can do that online. It's easy peasy. So make sure you are ready to vote for these great candidates. Thank you.